Hello and welcome to Fly With Your Shadow, the podcast all about music, mental health and illness, and the mess that the COVID pandemic has made of it all. I'm Jeff Robson, and the show comes to you from my home in Winnipeg, Manitoba. This week on the show, I'm pleased to present a recent conversation I had with a talented singer-songwriter who's become a very vocal advocate for mental health-related causes.
So you ask me to come back, then you throw me away. You know how to use me. You know what I'll say.
Melanie Brulée is a bilingual singer-songwriter originally from Cornwall, Ontario. She spent much of her 20s living in Australia, where she first picked up a guitar and developed an interest in singing and songwriting. She came back to Canada after a number of years away and quickly established herself on stages and at festivals across Canada and into the United States. She's released 2 full-length albums, a French-language album called Débridée, which came out in 2015, and an English-language album, Fires, Floods, and Things We Leave Behind, which came out in 2018. As you'll hear in our conversation, after some intense touring and hard work promoting that album, Melanie found herself burned out and questioning the direction she was heading in. A step away from music allowed her to focus on other areas of interest, including mental illness and mental health, which took on a new importance for her after she learned, long after the fact, that her estranged father had taken his own life. This led her to learn more about mental illness and deal with mental health issues of her own. In conjunction with Mental Illness Awareness Week in 2020, Melanie organized a series of conversations about mental health on Instagram Live and released a powerful song and video called The Mess.
Plenty of cake for everyone, you said. I try to get out of bed with lines on my face. I'm such a disgrace, oh yeah.
That song is a take on an all-too-familiar inner struggle, a showdown between anxiety and depression, each fighting for power over its host, leaving the mess in the wake. Earlier this year, she released another powerful song and video relating to the topic, this time in French, called Crier.
Ta frustration, je l'ai maîtrisée. J'ai reconstruit tes ponts brûlés. Et tout ça m'a épuisé. Alors j'ai pris ton nom et j'ai crié.
I encourage you to check out both those powerful videos, along with links to Melanie's site and more information at flywithyourshadow.com. I hope you enjoy this conversation I had with Melanie Brulée.
My name is Melanie Brulée. I was a full-time touring artist for the last 10 plus years. Learned how to play guitar in Australia when I lived there, and I spent most of my 20s in Australia. Came back and I moved to Toronto, and went just full on into music and pushing my career as hard as I could in French and in English. And then was touring a bunch in the States right before the pandemic hit, and had burnt out. I had totally burnt out. So at the end of 2019, I told myself I was going to take 6 months off, work it out, see if I wanted to do, keep going as I was, which was, I knew was impossible. So I was trying to figure out what was next for me. So I was like, I'm going to take 6 months off. And I did. And then that dovetailed into the pandemic. And, I have a pretty good relationship I like to think I have a good relationship with the universe. And so I'll ask her a question and normally she answers. And my, question at the end of 2019 was like, what do I do? What do I do next? I have all of these ideas spinning around like a tornado in my brain, just give me a sign of which is the right one to pursue kind of thing. And she never answered. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And then the pandemic hit and I was like, oh, that's why you didn't want me to start anything. I see. And so since then, I had a stressful 2020 and, like everybody did, the identity crisis, which I guess I had kind of had a head start on, but, still kind of nipped me a little bit. And then I I wanted to get into working in mental health actually. And so I started, I mean, I applied for a ton of jobs in like graphic design and a bunch of different things. Cause I mean, it's really difficult as an artist when you're trying to like put on a resume all of the skills that you have, you know, and be taken seriously, because I think that's a big problem with just the perception of artists and music is that like it's not, it's still a joke, you know, to a lot of people, and like people don't really understand how much you work really, and how hard you work and how creative you have to be and how many problems you have to solve, and like people management and graphic design and accounting, and like you are running a small business, you know, and you're doing everything yourself, and you know, maybe you have the luxury of subcontracting, you know. But yeah, so I was applying for jobs in a different field, and then a job came up at the Canadian Live Music Association, and truthfully, like I knew the organization existed, and I wasn't really quite sure what they did. And since joining the team in May, I realized that like there's such an important place for this organization right now, and that's because we represent and everyone who's not an artist. So everything like behind the scenes, from like suppliers to ticketing companies to festivals to agents and managers and like, you know, venues, obviously. And so there's been such like a huge need for the Canadian Live Music Association, because we do advocacy to the government and make recommendations to the government. By, you know, getting information from our members. So like we actually have like a seat at the table in Parliament, which is cool. Like, you know, we have somebody listening to our recommendations because we do lobbying. And so, you know, it's really cool to be part of that. And I'm really enjoying being behind the scenes in music at the moment. I feel like that's kind of what was driving me a little bit nuts about my career, is that I was just like sick of being the face of it, you know? And so, you know, I've been taking on a couple of radio tracking contracts as well, which is, you know, falls in that category of like pushing other people forward too, which feels super good right now. And I like working a 9 to 5. I mean, I work more than a 9 to 5, but like I'm getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning every morning. Who am I? Yeah, but I feel a lot more stable now, and like I feel like I've like fit into something that like really makes me want to hustle, you know, and I was sick of hustling. Yeah. So that's who I am and what I do in a nutshell.
Okay, a lot of things I want to get to there. I want to touch on all those things, but I want to go back and for folks that aren't familiar with your music career, give them a sense of sort of how many albums you put out, when that happened, and you know, how did you come to like, had you never played guitar before your 20s? Was that a new thing?
Totally a new thing. I was 21 when I first went to Australia. After high school, I worked a couple years in Kingston in restaurants. And then I was, you know, I wanted to get as far away as possible. And so I went to Australia, and yeah. And yeah, that first year that I was there, I actually, the first person I met is the one who taught me how to play guitar in Bondi Beach and all the way up the coast. So yeah, I hadn't played guitar at all before that, but then I started playing like jam nights and started writing with a girlfriend from England there. And like, we wrote terrible songs. They were terrible songs, but they had to be written. And we, you know, like we'd play them at jam night and get, you know, so nervous that, you know, yeah. I mean, it's just like, and then I was busking on the street a bunch. That's kind of where I think it forced me to grow a confidence that maybe I wouldn't have had otherwise, you know, to just like own a space on a street is like really vulnerable. but it's great. So yeah, no, I came back to Canada in 2011 after a back and forth of like 7 years. Of course I fell in love with an Australian guy, and We were together for 7 years, and yeah. And so I came back in 2011 and decided to push my career forward in Toronto, especially. So I was like, there's a lot of networking happening there, and I'd gone to my first folk music conference, and got invited to like come and hang out and whatever. So, and then I put out my first album in 2015, and my first album is called Débridée, and it's in French. And I noticed after 7 years in Australia, I came back with a little bit of an Australian accent, apparently, and like no French vocabulary left, like pretty much at all. There was a couple that were friends of mine in Australia that were from France, and so like I think even my French accent changed a little bit. I mean, like 7 years is a long time, and then yeah, so I came back and I had to make this decision for myself to like keep French in my life, and it's like, okay, you're an adult now, like you're not being forced to go to school or anything. You gotta do the work, if you want to keep this culture and keep this language in your life. So I did. I started listening to French radio a lot and watching, interviews with artists in French, and wrote grant applications in French, and just like fully immersed myself. And then I found after 2 years, I mean, like I grew up more French than English in my first few years of my life. And then when I was 6, my mom remarried, and he's Anglophone. And so, we started speaking mostly English at home, or French when I wanted to tell her something and I didn't want him to hear it. But then, yeah, I went to French elementary school, and then I went to English high school. So, I mean, I guess I'm bilingual through and through, but I mean, I had all of the knowledge already in my brain. I just needed to unlock it, really is what I wanted to do. And so I did this grant application to the Ontario Arts Council. It's a program that used to be called National and International Residency, and I don't think it exists anymore, but there's something similar that does exist. There's the Chalmers grant. But anyway, they gave me some money to go and spend like 3 months in France, which was awesome. And so I told myself I was going to write a poem in the morning and at night, no matter how bad and poor vocabulary they were. And then I'd come back and I'd take those poems and I'd turn them into an album. And then, like any good story, it totally derails. And yeah, and then we get into, dealing with, learning about my father's suicide, and then, going down the mental health path. So that was my first album in French that kind of unlocked that door for me. And then I put out an album in 2018 called Fires, Floods, and Things to Leave Behind. The French album was more indie rock, had synthesizers and like always still this kind of folk bass and a little bit of surf. Like there's like this like surf element to my French album. And then the English album kind of went more in like a classic country meets Quentin Tarantino vibe, like some kind of bluesy stuff and some, haunting stuff. And yeah, so those are the 2 albums that I put out under my own name.
Forgive my ignorance here, but the French music industry. So is most of your activity then, most of your touring and stuff, done in Quebec, or can you tour sort of a wider thing with a French album like that first record, Taking It Out? Are you spending much time in the rest of Canada?
I mean, I didn't tour a lot in Quebec. I played Francophonie in Montreal, and I played a few shows that like we put on kind of thing, a couple of album release shows. And but for the most part, I mean, like I wasn't touring anywhere else in Quebec. I was like spending a lot of time playing some great festivals in Ontario, which was awesome. And then a little bit in the West. And then there were like, some house concert tours, and then the English album, I really started digging into the US. And so I ended up living in Nashville for like a couple of years, and I was touring a lot around the East Coast. So I was hitting up Philadelphia a ton. I played the Philadelphia Folk Fest, which was awesome. And then like, New York City and Boston and DC. And I mean, I even did one of those tours in a 27-foot RV. I drove through Manhattan. I drove over the George Washington Bridge myself in a 27-foot RV. Felt like a boss, Jeff, tell you what.
It sounds like you're taking on a lot by jumping into the States, you know, recording in English all of a sudden and going all over these places. Was that kind of what leads to the burnout, is the fact that, I don't know, most of the musicians that I know and talk to spend most of their time in Canada. It's a little easier to focus on, you know, we know what we need to do and where the good spots are and all that stuff. But it seems kind of frightening to me and to a lot of Canadian musicians, I think, like when you go down to the States, like where do you start and how do you find your way in this huge thing? Is like, are you taking on too much in doing that? And is that what led to the burnout, or what's going on there? Or did you have a kind of a direct plan?
Well, is there a direct plan? And even if there is a direct plan, you got to expect the unexpected, you know, because like, yeah, I mean, absolutely that led to the burnout, but was also felt like the right thing to do at the time, you know? Like I didn't feel like I mean, until the end there, but like I didn't feel like I was going against, you know, you just like as an artist, you have opportunities put in front of you and, you know, it's hard to say no. And, you know, I have been saying no a lot lately and it actually feels really good, you know? And I think that's something that, you know, artists have a struggle with because we're so invested. It's not just our business, it's our person, you know, it's our story, it's our life, it's everything you are is tied in with, you know, it's pages out of your journal. Like, I don't know if it gets any more invested in your career, you know? And so you want to, you know, I mean, oh man, this could go down so many roads. I mean, like, the thing is with music is that like what I find with me when I first started, I mean, everybody around me was so supportive, so totally supportive. And, you know, I learned a lot from other musicians. You know, I was just like welcomed and, you know, my family was like behind me and everything. And I think that like helps propel you and you're like, yeah, of course I want to make it to whatever, you know, big thing I'm dreaming of, you know? And then at a certain point of just like pushing in all directions to see what sticks, I don't know if it happens for other artists, but I certainly had the moment where I was like, hang on, whose checklist am I checking off here? Like, I didn't write this checklist. What am I doing? You know, I don't actually want to do this and this. And like the trajectory that I'm on is taking me somewhere that I don't actually really want to be. And it's like, I don't want to play arenas. Like, I want to talk to people and I don't want to be like ushered away in a room. Like, I don't want fame. So why am I checking off stuff on my list that is taking me in that direction which to me, like, s'éloigne, you move away from people as opposed to moving towards people, you know? So, I mean, you might have a broader reach, but to me, everything I've seen on like fame is so lonely. And like, I, you know, get energy from people. Like, I like to see the room before I play it. Like, I'll always like, you know, check it out and like talk to people and like, you know, my performance was different every time. And like, that had been like from the get go. And like, maybe that comes back to the busking thing where it's like, you got to read the room. Like, sometimes you got little kids walking up to you. Sometimes you have, you know, people who are experiencing homelessness. And like, I had some amazing interactions with people who welcomed me, you know, from the sort of street community, in Byron Bay when I was busking, that like, I saw some beautiful moments that when you think nobody's looking, you know, the busker is there. Yeah.
You said you were experiencing kind of this identity crisis, but before the pandemic in 2019 is I think what you said. And so, I mean, at that time, like, are you already questioning whether you want to be a musician at all, or are you just looking for a new way to focus it on the things that bring you joy about that career?
I think I had the blinders on, and then it hit me with what else can I do, that's not this, because it just like, it was all consuming. I couldn't think about anything else, and like my working hours were like ridiculous, like just ridiculous, like always up until like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning on a computer when I'm not at a show, and like trying to sleep after being in a dark room with a computer in your face, and like, and you're writing grant applications, and you're like advancing shows, and you're like doing promo, and it's getting to the point with the freaking algorithm that you have to like send individual messages to people to come to your shows. And frankly, fans were burnt out with music before the pandemic. I mean, and so it was so hard to get people to like come out. People are burnt out in general. Like, we were overworked. I feel like as a society, we were asking for a little bit of reprieve here altogether.
Yeah, I think maybe we all kind of got a message from the universe that maybe some of us didn't even expect. But I mean, obviously you're into music. You've invested so much time in it because you love doing it, right? So I'm still curious about like, kind of in a way turning your back on it or deciding that this isn't going to be your main focus anymore. So like when you decide to go and do something else, like being a part of the Canadian Live Music Association or whatever, do you still feel like that music part of you is missing, or are you able to still fit in that piece? I mean, pretending that the pandemic doesn't exist, but
I don't feel like anything's missing at all. Yeah, no, like I just feel like other people have things to say that, like I'm just not inspired to write or play right now. And so like may as well, work on the other side of it. And like, I mean, frankly, truthfully, it's probably closer to getting me to my ultimate destination, which is living in the country. And, I, at a certain point, it's like, okay, well, you know what it is, Jeff? It's that like I felt like I was pushing like a square into a peg for a long time. And it like my manager and I have this saying that's like, does it feel like you're pushing shit uphill? It's like that's our thing. And if you feel like you're pushing shit uphill, then let's go in a different direction. And then, and so I kind of just took that and applied it to, but I certainly don't feel like anything is missing, because I wanted to get away from it totally. And then, I was thinking about like, oh, could I open a nursery? Could I go to school for something? Like, I mean, there were so many questions. Like, I love plants. I love herbs. Like, I looked into taking a culinary nutrition course. I was like, maybe I'll start a business. Like, maybe I'll, start, making green roofs on places. And I don't know, like maybe I'll keep bees, but like, I was like, it's all like trying to get me back to nature. And so I think it's like I'm exactly where I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I'm still very creative. I think my artist perspective gives me an interesting look, at this organization, because my boss, the CEO and president, is Erin Benjamin, and she was a touring artist for a long time too. She is a badass. Like, she is amazing. And the crew that I work with, like we're a small team, and I'm working with 3 younger women that are like just teaching me so much, like so much. I've got like, I think I have 15 years on one of them, and then she's just like teaching me stuff every day. It's wild. So yeah, it's actually nice to just like take a little like step back from the, and you know what, like I've been analyzing that exact thing a lot too lately, and I came to this realization that, how's this? Okay, so I may have become a performer because I had a trauma in my life, and so I had these like feelings of abandonment. And so I may have become a performer because I overperform in everything, that I do well, as a way to like feel that I am, or maybe because I'm worried that I don't feel like I'm enough. Okay, I don't know if that made any sense, but and so I kind of wonder if, like, because I've been doing a lot of therapy work with myself and like learning a lot about mental health, I'm like, maybe I don't need that validation anymore because I've learned how to validate myself. So, maybe I don't need that validation of being on stage, and maybe music is, everything is in flow anyway. Everything's always constantly changing. So maybe music is changing for me. Maybe the relationship that I have with it is going to be different. But I kind of know that, like, it's only a matter of time before I'm like, okay, get me in the studio. I need to, or I start writing again. And like, I'm still constantly surrounded by musicians and art and, like I'm, yeah. So music's got her claws in me. And, just when I was trying to get away, she was like, no, I am like deeper in music now than I ever have been in my life, even as an artist. Like, I'm connecting with so many different people behind the scenes in music. And like, we are, like, up to date on, COVID restrictions and all of that stuff. And we're, doing work in so many different departments. And there's like, just there's great stuff happening in terms of organizing music. And I hope that my real hope is that people start to get it a bit, Cause like, I thought for a while, I was like, what if we all just like went on strike? What if we all were just like, actually, no, you can't play music anywhere for 24 hours. No radio, no Spotify, nothing in your doctor's office, nothing in the car, no music, no grocery store, nothing, no music for 24 hours. See how you feel. Music is a part of everybody's life.
Oh, it sounds like a nightmare to me.
Right? Me too.
I can't imagine.
Sit with yourself for 24 hours without, but also, I mean, and that goes both ways too. Like, music is an escape, and music is also what makes you go internal, and it's like a safe place to work out all your shit.
All right. Well, you've mentioned it a couple times, and a big focus of this show, big reason why I'm doing it, I really want to have conversations around mental health, and you do as well. You have you've taken to that and have become, a big part of the mental health awareness and advocacy community. Can you tell me a bit about where that came from, or can you talk a bit about that trauma and those things that got you kind of down that road?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, like, my most recent connection with mental health is thanks to the Canadian Mental Health Association. And last year, in 2020, October 2020, was Mental Illness Awareness Week, and I was releasing a single called The Mess. And so I was like, how can I, being as though I'm sick of the industry and I'm sick of how everything has been going, and we've been in a pandemic for 6 months or whatever at that time. I was like, how can I do something different, to like promote a single without promoting a single? Cause I was so sick of selling myself. So I did an Instagram series of chats with mental health professionals, in different sort of domains in different places around the world on Instagram. And so we kind of shared the screen, and I would ask a few questions and, whatever. And so, I got in touch with the Canadian Mental Health Association to see if they wanted to have a representative join my little mini show kind of thing. And I had already been donating, some of merch sales to the CMHA, but I didn't really have like a contact that I was in touch with on a regular. But then in October, I met this woman named Angel in Cornwall, and she has been like an incredible steward for mental health and like involving people. And, she's got me part of the Suicide Prevention Coalition, and she's, nominating me for awards and this and that. And so like, I think, getting involved with it more on this level has really helped me work out some stuff that hadn't yet been worked out. And I mean that, my father, I have a weird story. Like everybody's got a weird story. This one's pretty weird. Um, my parents divorced when I was like 2, and then I would visit my dad on weekends. And then when I was like 3, he just like disappeared, and I still have no idea where he was or what happened. And then when I was 11, 8 years went by. I was 11, and my mom was on the phone in the basement, and I picked up the phone in the kitchen, and because I was a little shit, and I was like, who you're talking to? Because, we had landlines then, and she was never on the phone in the basement. And she was talking to my dad, and I was like, what? And so, she had found his phone number. She had always been looking, she said, and she finally found his phone number and was calling him to see first of all, if he wanted contact with me, and second of all, if he was sober, because he was an alcoholic. And so I hear my dad's voice on the phone for the first time in 8 years. And like the mind does this crazy thing where like you create your own story, and you do. And your memories, how true are they? How accurate are they? Because your mind likes to make patterns and likes to make stories. And so the thing, yeah, I mean, like it was so strange to hear somebody's voice for the first time in a long time. And then we went to visit him, and he looked like someone who was totally different, than the man that I had created in my head. And like the man that I had kept a relationship with in my head was still the same age. He didn't have gray hair and wrinkles, and he hadn't aged at all, And so seeing this man, with his arms out to me and like hugging him for the first time again was just wild. And then we built a great relationship over a year, and he used to train horses when I was really young for races. And so we would go, either my mom would drop us off to the mall, or she'd drop us off to a horse stable, and we would like hang out for a few hours, and then mom would come and pick us back up, and she would drive me back home to Cornwall. And we did that for like a year. He lived in Montreal. And then a year later, he passed away. And so, that was really difficult for like someone who had just had, a 12-year-old girl who just reconnected with her dad. And, I still had so many questions that I didn't have a chance to answer. And I was told that he died of a heart attack in his sleep. So 20 years go by, and I'm in the studio. I am recording Débridée, and I come home at night, and it's late, and I have to be at the studio really early the next day. And I'm thinking a lot about my dad because, he was from Montreal, and my mom is Franco-Ontarian, but like, there's like, a lot of the French was really in my head, and my culture and that sort of thing, and where that came from, and all the unanswered questions I had. And so we, like my producer was staying at my house, and he went to bed on the couch, and I was in my bedroom, and I thought to myself, I've never looked up my dad's girlfriend at the time from when I was young. And I found her right away on Facebook, and I started chatting with her, and told her that I was a musician. And she was like, your dad used to sing. And I was like, what? She was like, yeah, no, your dad used to sing, and, but he was an alcoholic, of course, and he didn't want to be hanging around in bars. And so that's why he never did, pursued it professionally. And I had no idea. And I never knew where my music came from either, So we organized for me to go and see her, and she found this tape of my dad singing, and so we played it and stuff. And then the truth came out that, she didn't know that I didn't know, but the truth was that he had taken his own life. And I didn't learn that until 20 years later, So then there's like a re-traumatization that happens that, you're kind of like reliving that and working that out. And, it's answering questions, but it's asking a lot more questions than were, that even could be answered. And you have to get your head around that. And that's a big, muddy pile of goop, you know? Um, but then, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I'm an optimist, and maybe that's to my detriment sometimes, but I guess I just like started using it as a tool, you know? And I'm someone who like obviously likes to talk a lot. But I work things out by talking them through, you know? And so I just like I overshared with a lot of people, and it just became my way of healing and working it out, you know? And to normalize it too. I mean, like, this is a thing that happened to me, and this is a thing that happens to a lot of people that are left behind by suicide. And, you know, and then the deeper you get into it, you're like, oh my gosh, we are all affected by this. And then the pandemic hits, and you're like, wow, look at us talking about mental health, and that wasn't happening 5 years ago. So, you know, there's movement there, and there's destigmatization, and there's a lot more that needs to happen, you know, but there's knowledge that's going around. And so, you know, it keeps me hopeful, and yeah, and that's why I'm involved in mental health.
What is your hope by having these conversations? Are you just kind of spreading awareness, or is it, still helping you deal with these things, or?
Oh yeah, both. Yeah, for sure both. You know, I'm to a point, I think, now that like I have a lot of tools in my toolbox. And so I'm happy to share them. And I'm like a big believer um in indigenous values in that way, you know, like of sharing knowledge and sharing everything. So yeah, I'm still working some stuff out. Totally. I mean, I guess that's life, you know. We keep working it out, and we do the best we can with the tools we've got. And so, like, if I've got some tools that might help you, then why not? You know, I took an interesting course. It was a DBT skills course that was offered by two women, Sarah Downing and her daughter Hannah, and it's dialectical behavioral therapy, and it's meant for folks who suffer from borderline personality disorder, BPD, and emotion dysregulation. It's also called. And it used to, yeah. And anyway, there's for folks who feel emotions to such a level that like you need something to snap back to whatever it is that's a healthy kind of reality for you, you know. But there are so many tools that I learned through this thing that like, and a great one was like, make yourself a mental health box. And I did this the other day, and like, truthfully, Jeff, we were supposed to have this conversation last week, and I couldn't because I was depressed. And I had like a few days of, luckily mine don't last very long, but I had a serious crash. And so I made myself a mental health box. And even though I took the course in January, I still hadn't made my mental health box when I needed it. But I went to the dollar store and got this cute little box, and I painted it, and you can do whatever you want in there. I mean, you can like have little notes of like things to remember when you're having either a depressive moment or a panic attack or whatever it is that you're suffering from. You can put a couple of tea bags in there, you know. You can like write a little note that says like, don't forget that fuzzy blanket that you love, you know, because when you're in the real shit of it, it's hard to think about building a ladder to get yourself out. So, you know, if you have this little box and you know that your ladder is there, it's like, oh, okay, it's all these things that I won't remember when I'm in the whatever it is that I'm in, you know. Yeah, there's some interesting things that you can do. The mind is fascinating, and the more I learn about it and the more I research it, it's like it's amazing what we do to help ourselves, to soothe ourselves, to protect ourselves, you know? And like, the more you learn about addiction, the more you realize it's actually a want for connection, you know? And like, Gabor Mate is fantastic if this, you know, if folks are interested in diving deep into that sort of the addictions, and the substance abuse issues.
Gabor Mate, yeah, I've been really interested in a lot of things. I saw a great film that he was a part of called "The Wisdom of Trauma," and talking about, how trauma leads to so many addictions and mental illness problems and so many other things. So yeah, there's certainly a lot that you can learn there and talk about, right?
Yeah, there's a lot more to learn too,
I don't know. For myself, I think I kind of tricked myself into learning these tricks by thinking that I can teach other people. So I'm a teacher by trade. That's my my day job and all that stuff. And I think sometimes I learn about mental health strategies or problems or whatever so that I can teach other people. And in the process, I realize that I'm actually kind of teaching myself. Is that a lot of what is going on here? Like, have you learned a lot about yourself by trying to kind of teach other people or spread these messages?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, yeah, yes, I have learned a lot about myself through this, but I don't think for me, the goal was never to teach people. It was, the goal was purely selfish. Yeah, you know, yeah, I mean, that's kind of where it started from. I wasn't like, I'm gonna learn these things to like, I couldn't think that far. I was like, I just need to learn these things. I need to know this stuff.
At some point, though, you did become an advocate. Like you have a whole section on your website, and you've done all these talks and stuff. So at some point, you purposefully went, okay, now I need to teach other people or help other people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess it's a matter of like of going back to that. Like, I have this information, so you should have it too. Like, yeah. I mean, and of course I keep learning about myself, and like, and now I can kind of like, yeah, I can validate myself, and that's like a new thing. Where I don't know if you have the same thing, but when I take a shower, my brain always kind of like goes into these like these little daydreams, and sometimes I like relive, me and my brain, we relive the like shitty things that I've said or shitty things that I've done that like are so old, you know? And so I was like, why do I keep going back to this thing? Like, I can't even apologize to this person like anymore. You know what I mean? Like, it's so past that, and it's so long ago. Like, I just need to work this shit out and get over it. How do I do that? And I realized that like stopping myself through that thing and being like, you said that. That's okay. It's done, It's like, or maybe like, of course, Mel, of course you would have said something silly like that. First of all, you were nervous. Second of all, like, just like talk to yourself like you would your best friend. And like, wow, what a new tool that was. Like, talk to myself nicely, I mean, going back to being an artist, I'm the hardest boss I've ever worked for. I'm an asshole boss, like, not to other people, to myself. Like, the hours I make myself work when I was running my artist business, all of it, like, terrible, terrible the way we talk to ourselves. And like, you stand around with a friend of yours and like, you can realize that like, I would never talk to you that way. You would never talk to me that way. We wouldn't be friends. Like, so I think it's important to like, get to a point where you do see yourself as a friend and an ally, and like, you can separate. Maybe that's why I like being, outside and in the country a lot, is that like those, you make your own kind of success marks, you make your own work too. And, it's not that I don't want to be productive. It's that like, I don't want to necessarily always be feeding into this freaking system, It's like the social media and the comparison and the, status and the whatever it is. It just like, that doesn't really sit well with me. I get way more high off hugging a tree, and like harvesting, you know, sunchokes and having building a fire and poking at a fire for a while. Oh, it's so good. I love it. Anyway.
You've released a couple of singles now, one last fall and I guess one earlier this year, right? And they both kind of have a bit of a mental health message or a bit of a tie-in. Is that safe to say? And is that kind of intentional or?
Yeah, it's just kind of what came out, but it was intentional when like the date of the Mess release was intentional. I wanted to do it around Mental Illness Awareness Week in October. And then and yeah, the Mess is about, like anxiety and depression having a fight over who's going to take over the host, and that one is like a little bit more indie rock. There's like, some rock elements to it. And then in April I released Crier in French, and that means to yell. And that song is like all about letting yourself feel whatever it is that you're feeling and like leaning into grief, and especially in the part that is anger, because anger is such a big part of grief of suicide, or has been for me. And I wrote that song as I was yelling at the ocean in Gaspésie at an artist residency, in between bawling my eyes out because I felt like I wasn't good enough to be at this residency and I was beating myself up so bad. And then I just needed to let it out. And so I went to the side of the ocean with my electric guitar that wasn't plugged in, my Gretsch, and I was playing just to myself and just screaming at the water. And it was so cathartic to just like, we're told that we shouldn't feel angry, that's bullshit. Anger is totally valid and is an important emotion, and it's important to know how to let it out, in a safe way, just like you would let all of your other emotions out in a safe way, Yeah, like anger can absolutely be destructive, but anger can also be super productive, And so what is it that's holding you back,
And are these songs kind of indicative of the type of writing that you were doing before, or do you think your focus of your writing, your sort of main topic or why you write is different now that you've done all these other things and you don't have that pressure of the music career so much?
I don't know, Jeff. I haven't written a song in a while. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Yeah, I'm not sure. I've jammed a little bit, fireside jamming, but not much is really flowing in that department. And I'm okay with it. I'm totally okay with it,
So it's not something that you're still trying to do or aspiring to do is write new songs. You're happy doing the things that you're doing, and if they come, they come. Is that kind of the message here?
Yeah, totally. And I'm just kind of letting myself like be in whatever direction I'm facing, And so it's like yeah, totally. If it comes, it comes. And I think I forced so much of music that it became a job and not an outlet anymore, that I ruined my own dessert kind of thing. So yeah, it's just like, I just need to, it's like any unhealthy relationship, step away, step away for a bit, and like to find the joy in music again is really what I'm after. And, it's funny because like every interview I do, and I did, a bunch of them through COVID because I had 2 singles come out. People are always asking, like, is this part of an album? Are you doing more? Like, what are you doing next? What else are you doing? Like, is there more music coming? And I'm like, even that question kind of gets my goat a little bit, because I'm like, we are the hardest hit.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the pressure that was the problem, right?
Yeah. And we're the hardest hit industry, and everybody wants, just to consume so much all the time that it's like, when that is more important than how are you, that's where we're getting into problems here. And that's where like we need to stand up as artists and industry, and you know, our fault for not having set the boundaries. But, you know, it's really difficult to answer that question, especially during this time, you know. And it's like, I would love to tell you what you want to hear, but the truth is I haven't been inspired to write. I've had a great, you know, few months, but I had a real roller coaster ride before that, and we're still in it, and all the best music comes after, you know. And so, like, we're still processing stuff, you know. You kind of like want to have that, have the luxury, you know, of a little bit of time passed, maybe. I mean, sure, write your way through it, but edit it too. And like, it's hard to like really get a grasp of what you're living while you're in it, you know. Your only job is to get through it. We're still in a pandemic. It's just going really long for us, you know. Time feels really long, you know, and we want to be super productive all the time because we're humans and that's what we do.
But I think hopefully we're, artists in particular, are maybe learning a lesson that the product is not necessarily, you know, your only contribution to the world. It's not your whole identity. Is the product that you put out.
Exactly.
You know, so putting pressure on yourself to have that product or to have the perfect product or whatever, maybe you get lost in that. And maybe that was, you know, a big part of your identity crisis, was working towards that product and not so much
100%
considering yourself.
100%.
We never talked about it, it's just the way it was.
You can find out a lot more about Melanie, her music, and her mental health initiatives at her website, melaniebrulée.com, BRULEE.com. I've got links to her site and her videos posted at flywithyourshadow.com. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and learned something along the way. If so, please help spread the word about this episode and this program by telling your friends, your family, your coworkers about the show. I could really use your help spreading the word. Anything you can do would be greatly appreciated. Little reminder to you to please take the time to look out for yourself and those around you. Spread some joy, empathy, and support around, and take some of that for yourself. Watch out for signs that you or people around you are struggling. There are many great resources available in good times and bad, and you can find links to some of those at flywithyourshadow.com. I always really appreciate hearing from listeners, so if you have any questions or comments or feedback or suggestions, drop me a line at flywithyourshadow.com. My name is Jeff Robson. I sincerely thank you for taking the time to listen today. I hope you'll join me again on the next episode of Fly With Your Shadow.